Hi, Leonard, and hi, Robin and Florence.
We are now live on Facebook.
Good
And
to
recording.
see everybody.
Excellent. Kim, can you make me co-host, please? Thank you.
Looks like we've got lots of people joining, and we're going to get started in just a few moments. Thank you so much for joining on this day after the election.
I'm so exhausted. I want to sleep right now. So bear with me, okay? I might fall asleep because I had a sleepless night. Every hour checking if it's up. Every hour checking every hour till 5. So
I know the feeling. Congratulations, though, Douglas. That's incredible.
yeah.
For those of you just joining, we are going to post something on the screen. You're used to joining these meetings and renaming yourselves, so that's going to be the first screen, but this is a special meeting because we're going to be doing some voting today. And so there will be some additional things showing up on your screen name, and if you see that, do not worry. It's just the ILG team behind the scenes tracking all of you that are eligible to vote in our SERP discussion. And as I mentioned, we're going to get started in just a couple of moments. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen while we are waiting for everyone to log on.
Oh, crap.
Good evening and welcome to the AB 617 Community Steering Committee meeting for Stockton. We're going to get started in just a couple of seconds. You should see on your screen ways for you to rename yourself, your screen names. Please do go ahead and do that. And we will get started in just a few seconds. As you'll note on the screen, this is going to be a special voting meeting for the CSC. And so if you're used to seeing how your name is usually listed, it might look a little different today because the ILG team is working behind the scenes to add a few additional characters to your name to make sure that we know everyone that is eligible to vote in our voting meeting. And Hannah and Kim, if you can let me know when we have Ryan and our community co-host on the line, we will get started.
I believe I have seen both of them on the line.
I'm here.
Hi, Ryan.
Good evening.
All right, well, I think we're ready to get started with this Community Steering Committee for the Stockton Community AB 617 program. My name is Erica Manuel, and I'm at the Institute for Local Government. We are part of the facilitation team for this process, and my colleagues tonight are Hannah and Kim, who have been with you for the last few months and are waving with you on the screen. We are here to help you with navigating any problems you might have technically or otherwise. And obviously our goal here is to facilitate this conversation and make sure that we capture community voices and priorities as we develop the emissions reduction plan for Stockton. Obviously, there is a lot going on today besides this meeting. So before we dive into our agenda and into our formal business, I just wanted to take a few minutes to give everybody a chance to center on everything that's happening both locally and nationally right now. I know there's a lot of people that are just probably in a space where this meeting might be the last thing on your mind or on your priority list. And so these are two things that may help as we figure out where we go from here, regardless of where you land in the space of politics or non. You're all community leaders and you're community activists and you're connected to what's happening, not just on the environmental and air quality space, but in other words as well. And so here are two things to kind of think about as we move into a discussion that is completely, well, not completely, but somewhat unrelated to the work that we're doing. And we did want to make sure that everyone has a little bit of a second to recenter. So please do give yourself permission over the course of today or tomorrow or this week to take time to breathe, to live life, to give, to love, to reflect and be present. And if you can, choose to be optimistic and hopeful for whatever the future brings. I know there is a lot that is up in the air for a lot of communities now, and Stockton in particular, and nationally as well. So we are moving forward today with a very important meeting. And one of the things that I think we want to talk about is the big project that this community steering committee is working on. And this agenda reflects a pretty important portion of the discussion that you're all having and have been having for the last few weeks and months. We are going to spend the majority of our meeting today on the draft list of SERP strategies. We're going to discuss those items. We're actually going to vote on them, individual incentive measures. And then we want to really get a sense from this committee and start to understand and frame which measures are going to be included in the SERP based on your guidance and feedback. We're going to explain how we're going to vote on those measures a little bit later, but this meeting is going to be a little bit different than our usual meeting. And so as I mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, we are going to be updating your screen names with some tags so that we can track everyone and make sure that the voting takes place in a streamlined manner. As you can see from this agenda, there are only two agenda items today. It's the SERP and the air monitoring plan update. And so there's a lot to cover in a short amount of time, and there's a very, very important piece of what this committee is doing. There are over 24 different strategies recommended in the draft SERP so far. So our goal for tonight is really to try and get through at least 10 of those strategies, starting with the ones that you ranked as the top priority. We hope that you've had a chance to review the draft SERP measures and share your thoughts and comments on those strategies and get them to the Air District. A lot of you have done that, and we appreciate that feedback. If you haven't done that, today's your chance. Today's your chance to review the strategy, see what others have said, others have recommended, share your suggestions, and ask questions. We're going to be taking some live notes during this meeting to make sure that we capture additional suggestions, and we're going to do that directly on the document on the screen so that you can see it. Normally, we would do a meeting like this in person. This is not normal, right? We're going through a lot with social distancing and the pandemic, and we're trying to work within the parameters that we have. And so I want to thank you in advance for your flexibility, for your patience with this process. I know the last meeting that we had for this community ran a little bit long. There is a chance that this meeting will run a little bit long as well. I am going to try and keep everyone on time, and I'm going to try and keep this process moving, but I also want to be reflective of the values that you all have, the priorities that you've set. So we're going to do our best, and we're going to be flexible, and I'm going to thank you in advance for that flexibility. I want to make sure you feel like you've had enough time to understand the concepts, weigh in on the strategies, flag concerns, and the Air District's actually going to schedule another meeting in November to make sure that this is really covered to the depth and the reasoning that you'd like. So I'm going to turn it over to Hannah for Zoom controls and reminders, and she's going to talk about how we're going to use those Zoom controls today. You're very familiar with this. We've been doing Zoom for a couple of months now, but this is a voting meeting. So we want to make sure that the voting piece is clarified, and we're going to clarify that a couple different times today. So moving forward, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah.
Great, thank you, Erica. Okay, so under your participant panel, when you click on participants, you're gonna see a pop-up window. In that pop-up window, you're gonna find your traditional blue hand. which we ask you to use if you're planning to speak. Otherwise, committee members are remaining on mute. So you're going to use your blue hand, and also in that pop-up panel under the participants, you're going to see two buttons. Green button, yes, and red button, no. Those are additional functions, additional buttons we're going to be using today, so you can cast your vote. Those of you who are joining us on the phone, you guys don't have access to these buttons, so we're going to unmute you if you're joining us just on the phone, and we're going to ask you to cast your vote verbally so we can record it. Those of you who are on the phone, you're going to stay on mute. If you would like to unmute yourself, you're going to press *6. And those of you on the phone, if you would like to raise your hand, your blue hand, you're going to press *9. It's very important for us to link both accounts. If you're joining us on the phone and on the computer and you're a voting member, let's make sure we'll link those accounts. To do that, you're going to press pound on your phone and type your participant number. And if you don't know how to find the participant number, let us know in the chat box.
Hannah, my hand is up. I'm co-hosting tonight. I just want to welcome everybody. I have to say that although I was at the co-hosting meeting with a couple of people and we discussed voting there, I didn't actually receive anything saying that we would be voting tonight. I thought tonight was still just about discussion and really getting to know each of these different SERP strategies so we can talk as a group. I'm not sure that we're ready to vote. I think we need much more discussion about this. So in listening to Erica, mention really wanting that collaboration, that meaningful collaboration, I really appreciate that, because I feel like all of us have been working in silos, and these meetings are really the only time when we can be together to talk about this stuff with other like-minded people and knowledgeable people and experts in the room. I think we need to discuss today. Yeah, when I asked about voting at the meeting to prep for this, there was no real strategy to vote. I mean, there was still like no idea how the voting was going to take place, and that worries me as well, considering we are talking about a lot of money. So I think we need a lot of clarification and some logistics about this, and some time, real time, to discuss and collaborate together as a group, as a whole group.
Naomi, thank you for and I see similar sentiments in the chat box as well, and we're extremely flexible and want to listen to the steering committee and get their input. If that's the desire of the committee to proceed that way, we're 100% on board and amenable to doing this. I think having those discussions like you're talking about, Naomi, and I've seen Catherine and others talk about, it's beneficial because it's still going to move us forward. And I think that's the big goal of all these meetings is making sure that we're always taking steps forward. So yeah, we can definitely transition and just focus and talk about the measures themselves and answer the questions. And then we can get input from the steering committee on later on about how we go about eventually voting on these.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And to your point, I think the intent here is that one of the things in the charter for this community is to make sure we have consensus, or if in the absence of consensus, we get a sense of what everyone's thinking. We can leverage the technology to get your general thoughts about how you feel about these. We don't have to weigh in and make it this very formal, very sticky document that can't be edited. One of the things I'm hearing, and I hear this from the area district a lot, is that everything can be adjusted, everything can be refined. And so in the spirit of hearing from the community during this session, let's prioritize getting everyone's voice heard. If voting comes out of it and people say, yeah, I like or don't like, we can do that. We'll be flexible. Hannah and Kim are on the back end to kind of help do that. We'll keep the notes. We'll take notes as we're going. And if we find that it helps to structure the conversation to vote, we'll do that. If we find that it complicates things and you don't feel comfortable with it, we don't have to. we have lots of options today. And again, this is your meeting and your committee, and this is your feedback that it should be incorporated, and we can absolutely do that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm wondering though about what you said just now about the air district and how it can be changed and refined at any time. Can you give me a little bit more information about that? Because I thought we were the committee that's making the decision, and that these, you know, with heavy community member input. And I'm curious about what do you mean about this can change at any time?
You want to start? Well, specifically that this meeting isn't the meeting. There will be numerous meetings over the course of the next couple of weeks to talk about these items. And so what I was specifically referring to is that if you say something today and you have some really important feedback today, but then after hearing something else next week, you need to modify it, that can be adjusted. And I believe there's also flexibility throughout this process through the end of this year to make adjustments. And Ryan and Jamie can weigh in on that too.
So end of this year as in December, or end of this like school year? Because that's where my mind is. What do you mean?
So, yeah, I was having a conversation with Jonathan earlier about this topic. This process, as we're going through this and working with the committee, until we have a document that working with the committee that they feel is final, that would be the time that, you know, the measures would be final. Up until then, they're still all a work in progress until that date. The allowance, you know, one of the things that the Air District staff are geared up and ready to work on is, you know, putting together doing the write-ups on the individual measures. And so to whatever opportunity that we get to do that work, and as early as possible, in order for us to be able to present a document to the committee, understanding that there may be some additional details that need to be fleshed out before it's final worthy for the committee. Those are the things that we're you know, looking to work with the committee to be able to do that work, to get the document itself ready. Understanding that, you know, we are still working under some really tight timelines, and really appreciate the flexibility that all the steering committee have shown. You know, being willing to add additional meetings and get together and work through these things. It's been critical to this process. So thank you so much.
I see that Douglas has his hand up. Do you mind if we let Douglas ask a question? Douglas, I think you're on mute.
He's unmuted.
We can't hear you, unfortunately.
His hand is down.
Yeah, you are having a sound issue at the moment, Douglas. I did hear, did Mary Elizabeth have a question?
No, did I have my hand up?
No, but you did, you lit up, your box did light up, so I wanted to make sure of that.
Okay.
It looks
yeah,
like Douglas might be.
I don't know how I lit up, but I'm glad I've got the light.
You've got a light, you're good.
Interpreter speaking. Douglas wants to say something. So when we vote, so when we vote, when we voted the last time, you guys were mentioning before that You guys were talking about voting before, right?
We did, yes. Well, are we
Ryan?
referring to earlier in the conversation today?
Yes.
And it sounds like the consensus from the committee is they're not sure they're going to be comfortable doing any formal voting today. What we're going to do is begin the process of talking about all the CERT measures, discussing the order of those, and making sure that those comments are shared and the committee has the opportunity to share each other's ideas, see the feedback received so far. If the committee feels comfortable with beginning that voting process, we'll do that, understanding that there's some flexibility around moving things around in other meetings that come up in the next couple of weeks or months, since we do have through the end of certainly this year to continue refining this CERT. So our goal is to begin the process, start moving down the trajectory of starting to put measures in order and deciding what we'd like to include in the CERT, but know that we have the flexibility to make some adjustments as needed. If voting happens today, we're prepared to do that logistically. If we're not comfortable with it, we don't have to. Priority number one, get your feedback, see the comments, see the document as it lists right now, make your additional edits, and we'll see how it goes. Does that work for everyone? I feel like we should test voting. Does that work for everybody? Maybe a quick thumbs up?
Vote to not vote.
To vote or not vote. We can see, we can play along. We can see how it goes. Mary Elizabeth's giving a thumbs up. Let's work with that approach. We are prepared. If you guys say, actually, this is looking pretty good, let's start to think about it. We can do that. Otherwise, this is your meeting and this is your CERT. Like I said, there's a lot of information to digest. It can feel like a lot. Let's make sure you're comfortable with it. So let's start there. So let's start with really important information that reflects some of the comments we've heard in previous meetings. And one of those comments is that you're really kind of confused about the funding piece. We get a lot of questions about funding. How does funding work? How do we decide on funding? So Ryan's going to give us a little bit of a short snippet on what it is. Tell us about funding. How does this funding piece kind of connect the dots, and how should you be thinking about funding? Because it's hard to look at measures and dollars without understanding how it all fits in. So Ryan's going to help a little bit talk about how you should think about the money that's being proposed before we start showing you what the CERP looks like as it stands right now, or not the CERP, but the measures currently proposed. So Ryan, I'm going to hand it over to you. And what we did skip, just formality wise, I just want to make sure we flag this. Public meeting, public comments at the end, being recorded on Facebook, all that stuff is happening. And community co-host today is Noemi. Thank you for your insights at the beginning. If you have anything additional to say, please raise your hand. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But I'm going to hand it over to Ryan to talk about the funding so we can stay on track.
Yeah, and I really want to thank both Noemi and Jonathan for raising this as a question. We have talked about it a little bit, but I understand that we've thrown a lot of stuff out there, and it's hard to keep everything, track of everything. And so I think it'd be a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about this and make sure that everybody is understanding and on the same page. So the question of AB 617 funding, the program is funded from what's called greenhouse gas reduction funds. It was funding through the cap and trade program, the state. The districts get the funding. It's provided through CARB to districts for the program, the AB 617 program. And there's really two pots of funding. And so we've talked a lot about the incentive funding, and we sent out the spreadsheets and had everybody look over them and look at different incentive funding type measures and what potential funding allocation amounts. Those are the things that are on the left-hand side of this this table. These are not ones that we've already included. These are just some of the ones that the steering committee have identified as things that they potentially like to look at as part of the funding. So, things like trees and urban greening, mobile source emission reductions, home and school filtration, bike path projects, electric vehicle projects, projects at rail yards, and other similar types of grants. The other side is the implementation funding that the district gets to implement the program across the district. So right now, the district has 3 communities. We have Stockton, we have South Central Fresno, and we have Shafter. And so for the work that we do to implement the different things of the program, that's where this funding source comes in. And we also sent out another separate spreadsheet with those types of measures. Where the things that this really focuses on is like district staff time to do the work. And that's probably Jamie saying, texting me to slow down a little bit, so I apologize, Sergio. These are things like meeting interpretation, the facilitation, stipends for resident members of steering committees, and other meeting costs. The enforcement measures. So we've talked, and we'll talk in more detail as we go through the questions and the comments that were provided to us about enforcement and what enhanced enforcement looks like, how that differs from just the district's regular enforcement under an AB 617 program. Additional outreach and education that's provided specific to the AB 617 communities. The regulatory work, part of this program requires, as we talked about before, an evaluation of district rules and regulations to make sure that we're instituting things like best available retrofit control technology in our rules. This is a lot of work with cities, counties, the California Air Resources Board, schools, the port, the Council of Governments, and other partners. And then lastly, a big component of this is the air monitoring. It's the staffing and the equipment to do the air monitoring under this program. There was questions and concerns about whether or not funding needed to be shifted from the implementation to the incentives to do that work. The way that we go about doing this is, so we assess without knowing all the individual measures that the community is going to come up with that are going to fall under the implementation. We do have some experience in working with South Central and Fresno and Shafter on roughly what that time amount takes to oversee and implement these types of programs. And so that's where we've allocated enough resources and staffing and like air monitoring equipment and things of that nature to do that in Stockton already. Now, if there was a measure that, for example, it would take thousands and thousands of hours to do that we didn't budget for, then that would be something that we'd have to take a look at. The things that we have so far, it's not, we're okay with where we're at, and we'd be able to do those in addition to possibly some additional ones if the community comes up with additional measures that fall under that implementation side. And so, if anybody has any questions about any of this, you can drop it in the chat, or you can always, everybody is free to call me at any time, and I'm happy to talk about that with them.
So thank you, Ryan. So I don't see any hands at the moment, but what I'm hearing is that we've got $35 to $42 million for this community to do incentives ranging from some of the things on the list that you showed. And then we've also got, and we're going to show a visual of this as we move on, we've also got some other measures that people are proposing in the SERP that are going to be discussed, and there's going to be dollar amounts associated with those. And so the Air District, to our knowledge, has in this document identified what they think is maybe the money that might be necessary to accomplish in a reasonable way the measure if you include it in the SERP. So we're going to talk a little bit about that once we see all the measures and start working through it. But that's kind of where the funding comes from and how the funding should be pooled. We have a lot of flexibility around moving dollars around, and when we get into the SERP discussion, which is going to happen in just a second, we're going to be able to talk through that. That doesn't sound like we're going to have a full funding conversation today, but Ryan did want to give an overview of how funding is structured. And then after we've covered all the measures, we'll have another follow-up conversation about funding, so you can do it with all your eyes open and really think about how to move buckets of money around if we need to. I do want to give Noemi a second to give just additional kind of community co-host thoughts. And then if there are questions related to what we talked about, we'll take those right after Noemi jumps in.
Hi, everybody. Let me make sure that you can see my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, lovely. So thank you for welcoming me. I'm happy to be here as a co-host. I am a little bit nervous and I feel a special kinship to everybody who's been a co-host before me. So shout out to you all. I am the principal of St. George School, and St. George School is right in the middle of the AB 617 boundary area. There's a lot in my community that I'd like to see different, and I can show you this is my community truly. Even though I'm listed as a CSC member because I'm the principal here, this is where I grew up. This is where I spend my time. All of these red circles here are houses that I've lived at. And had I known the legal definition of homeless, I would have qualified my whole life and had my whole college tuition paid for. And it's like, oh, darn, I missed that boat. But here, thank my lucky stars that everything worked out well. And these are the places. So I feel like whatever's been happening in this community for this long, I am just now hearing about this environmental initiative, and I'm really happy to be a part of it because I don't just represent me. I don't just represent my family. I represent all the children who come to my school, the St. George community, the parish, the houses in the neighborhood, the homeless people in the neighborhood, and there are many, and we are all here together making the best of whatever situation, especially 2020 is throwing at us these days. So I just want to say, thank you to all of you. I want to show this picture here, and I know it's not really clear, but more importantly for me is that you see the different colors in the sunset. And I want to say that when, Stockton is known for these beautiful sunsets, and sunrises. And one of my favorite things to do was come to the sunrise Easter service around, Easter in the spring. And when I told my husband about this, he was like, oh, yeah, that's beautiful. But we didn't know growing up, we didn't know for all of these years that those beautiful colors in the sunset are caused by pollution, refracting the light in special ways. So unfortunately, yeah, we have beautiful sunsets, but it's because of the pollution that's in the air. And that makes me so sad. So I want to show you, these are my students. They are the best part of my day. They are here on campus. These pictures are from last year before COVID. So I just want you to see their faces because they are real. We are real people in this community. We play, we live outside, we, enjoy each other's company. And this is our community. So when you drive by our school, you don't see a whole lot. When you drive through this neighborhood, you don't feel like a whole lot is going on. But let me tell you, this is an award-winning basketball team here. And these are my students presenting at the Stockton Arena for an event. I mean, these are just incredible things. These on the right are my children, my biological children, my husband, my family. Both of them, two of them are enrolled at my school. So I take this incredibly personally, and I don't ever want to minimize the importance of the work that we're doing here to protect these children, my children, your children, the people in the neighborhood, the people who don't know how to advocate for themselves just because they don't have an opportunity to be a part of this, or they don't have time or space in their brain, or they have other more pressing issues. And we know in Stockton there are many issues. So I'm going to poke fun at myself here. We did a little walk through Halloween event, and that's me in the chicken costume. And it was kind of timely only because every time we do homework pickup, which this was, we also give out food. So we had food donation bags and we were giving away eggs. And there I was in the chicken costume. So there's that. I want to show where our school is right here in this center yellow part. And so it was quite shocking for me in those first few meetings when we talked about how the wind blew from, top to southeast there. Because if I look at that on a map, we are directly southeast of the Port of Stockton and one of the major polluters. So for me, that was frightening. It was frightening enough that when it came time for us to purchase a home for my family, there was no way I could purchase in Southeast Stockton. Now that I knew this, there was no way I could purchase in Southwest Stockton. And that was so hard for me because this is my community. My family is here. But I also know that 3 people in my family are affected by asthma. And I could never, never live with knowing that there was something I could have done to make their situation better. And I didn't. So I take that responsibility now, not just on behalf of my own family, but for all of the other families that do live in this area and all of the families who will be here after our entire generation is gone. So I want to make sure that we all feel the weight of the importance there. So this is my last slide. I just want to say thank you. These are just kids. We're just people. We live here. We want so many amazing things for our kids and for our families. But obviously the one most important thing should be our health. I mean, it shouldn't even have to be a discussion. And right now we are a part of that discussion. So the decisions that we make, the discussions that we have are really critically important in advocating for them, for the kids, for the elderly in our neighborhood. I mean, I just want to say thank you. Because I really enjoyed getting to know all of you and building those relationships so that I can look for opportunities to bring some of that environmental information to our students. And I've done that. So just the other day, I was over at the Boggs Tract Family Farm, and that was the coolest place ever. So thank you, Kenda, for inviting me there. And Jonathan was a guest speaker for our middle school grades. And, so I'm reaching out to people. Mariah Looney was also a guest speaker. Robin de Guzman will be too. And so I want to just thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this, for listening to us, for caring enough about our community that you allow the community members, the residents, to really have the best say in what happens here. Thank you.
Nomi, thank you so much for that insight and for your presentation. I feel like I need to give you a reaction. That was amazing. It was a perfect center for what we're going to do for the rest of this meeting, which is really think about how you can make a direct and positive impact on your community and what measures specifically will do that. You've already given a lot of really, really good feedback to the Air District. This meeting is really about showing you what that feedback is, not only yours, but in the context of your colleagues too, and figuring out, kind of beginning the process of starting to shape your SERP, right? This is a hard thing to do even in person. It's even harder to do on Zoom. We're gonna work through it. We're gonna try and go as quickly as we can, but we're gonna go at the pace that you wanna go to make sure you get the conversation that you want to have and you get the dialogue that you need to have to make the impact on the kids that Naomi is talking about and the communities that you live in and the residents that you all are. So that's our goal today, and we can get that done at whatever speed we need to. I want to show you something, which is if you remember, the Air District has sent you numerous emails and probably even mailed you some things that show the SERP strategy options. I'm going to show you how you ranked those options based on what you have so far, because we're going to take the discussion in the order that you prioritized over the last couple of weeks. And that's how we're going to begin this. And then we're going to move through and we're going to talk about the descriptions. We're going to talk about the feedback you've gotten from your colleagues. We're going to give you the chance to give more feedback for each item. We're just going to really dig in. We're going to go as fast as we can, but we're going to go as slow as we need to. And my colleague Kim is going to take notes in just a second. But first, let me show you the order of the measures that you've prioritized so far. 1 second. So you should be seeing right now all of the incentive strategies. There are 25 of them in order. First, you have vegetative barriers, and it goes all the way through to number 25, which is parklets, pocket parks, and traffic calming measures. We are going to show you a very large document that's got each one of these measures in its description, its title, and the comments received on each one. And we're going to go through each one in order. And I think based on our schedule, it's 5:30, 5:40 right now. We're going to maybe get through 5, maybe 10 of these if we're really lucky and there's a lot of consensus, maybe more, maybe less. But this is the order of the strategies. And we're going to start with vegetative barriers, and we're going to take them in order, and we're going to generally get your feedback. If you're feeling comfortable with them and are committed to the order that's in this now, we're moving along, we're making progress. If we have any contention, we have any concerns, if we've got some major edits that need to be made, we're going to flag that for another meeting and keep moving. So I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to ask anyone, actually, I'm going to keep this on the screen. Hannah and Kim, if you could, see if we've got any hands. Looking at this list of strategies, and primarily, let's say the first side on the left-hand side, are there any questions about all of these incentive strategies or any of these incentive strategies? Do you have questions about what they mean, what they are, how they came about, anything big picture that you want to ask now before we start going in order 1 through 25?
Question, Jonathan Pruitt. My question was, are we going to be able to see the questions that all the other groups have asked within the actual see it on picture, or is it just going to be like you'll read them off and then we'll, I guess we'll just hear it, or could we actually see it on screen?
You're going to see it on screen. You're probably going to see more text than you want to see, but actually you're going to see, and in just 1 second, you're going to see the vegetative barriers item, the description as it's written, and then all the comments received on how it could be implemented.
Erica, we have 2 hands from Debbie and Mary, and we actually have a good clarifying question in the chat box that would be good addressing for the whole group.
Great. And I'm going to stop share so I can see a little bit better. 1 second.
Debbie, go ahead.
Oops. I just lost what we were
Do you want me to put it back up?
Yes, please.
I'll put it back up. No problem.
Number 25. If we're going to be discussing this, I think, yeah, we need to have it up. Number 25, parklets, pocket parks, traffic calming measures. I don't remember that being on the list. Is that something that was just added recently?
And Jamie can speak to this, but there were 3 new measures added in the recent edit, and they haven't been discussed yet and need to be talked about, and that one might be one of them. Jamie, can you confirm that? The last 3 are those 3 new ones?
The last 3 are new ones. They have not been prioritized. And Erica, I do think it would be beneficial to bring up an example of what we're going to be showing people, because we're starting to get questions. You put really easy, small names on all of these. That does not mean that they're, it's everything there. Also, the prioritization is from earlier in this process. So we do think that some of these may move around as we go through this process. So there's the last 5 are fairly new. They were not on the original prioritization. So like all the comments about physical barriers, they're in there. That's in there. And I think we just need to, Erica, show folks what we're looking at.
Yeah, let's do it. So Kim's got that document, so she's going to be the one sharing that.
And we do have a hand
and then there's
Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth, you also had a question.
Thank you. I think you've clarified it. I just would like to see bike infrastructure before routes.
And we're going to discuss that just to let you guys know what you're looking at. So at the top is just a simple 1 or 2 word descriptor. Here, vegetative barriers. It's just what we want to call it. We can change that if you want. Then we have a draft of what that strategy might begin to say. It's an incentive program for the installation of vegetative barriers and sound walls. That's something that was added new, that was not originally in here, is now in here. You can read that language. And then we've got all of the comments that we've received to date that have been through those 2 rounds that you guys, sheets that you've given back to us. And I'll let you know that A is for one of our advocates, That's A stands for advocate, R stands for resident, B stands for business, and D stands for government. And we have, and some of these, they have a lot of comments, some not so many comments. As we go through them, I'll try to answer questions. There were not a lot of questions that folks came back to us with on vegetative barriers. I will tell you that we have a lot of questions, just the Air District, because we were trying to, we had a meeting with Caltrans earlier this week. We're trying to get a better understanding of what these cost, what the time frame is on installing these types of things, and what the air quality benefit is based on vegetative barriers versus sound walls versus, excuse me, vegetative barriers versus vegetative barriers with sound walls versus sound walls, and some of the pros and cons about that. And we've been working with CARB about that. So we are still trying to get more of that information so that we can have a better understanding of the scale of this one. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all.
Ryan, you had a question or comment? Or you're on mute.
Yeah, I had a quick comment just to follow up on what Jamie is talking about. There's a lot of specific details in this, and there's several things that go on, like in the development of the individual CERP measures. And I just want to make sure that as we're working through this, that everybody's kind of on the same page with how these historically have been put together. And not just the districts, but even outside the district. And a lot of these measures, when they're developed, they don't have a lot of the specifics of where the, for example, since we're looking at vegetative barriers right now, the measure that we're getting included in the CERP wouldn't have the details like we are going to put in a 300-foot vegetative barrier along with a sound wall next to I-5 near Conway Homes. The CERP development is one stage of the AB 617 process. What happens is once we have the CERP, that's when the real work with the committee on the specifics of where we need to look at, where we're going to do these things, what we're going to focus on. One of the things that we could talk about with vegetative barriers is the possibility of having a study as part of that to get an arborist or someone like that, but similar to what we've done in Shafter, to work with the steering committee to develop plans on where some of this stuff could get done. There's a ton of work that needs to go on the specifics of these, and that's really as part of the implementation process of this. The measures themselves, it's usually better if if it's too specific and then we want to make changes to those, that may require us needing to go back to the board to modify the CERP, things like that, which delays the process. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody heard that and kind of understands that in regards to this.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Jamie. Really quick, I see two questions, but before we go to those, can I ask, what do we want to get from them, to the committee today? Do we want to get them to review these comments and say, these make sense to me? Do they want to get additional comments? Do we want to, what would you say is helpful to you as you continue to sort of, what's the most helpful to you right now for this group to weigh in on?
Maybe just if there are things within the comments that are troubling, and if there's any clarification they need, just general thoughts beyond what maybe is already seen here.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And then Debbie had a question, and then Ed. Debbie? we don't hear from Debbie in a second, I'm going to ask Ed to unmute himself
Can
and
you hear
jump in.
me okay?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
there you are. Hi.
I was wondering, what I was thinking as far as vegetative barriers are, when I was growing up, we needed a fence between my neighbor and us. So we put in Arizona cypress, and they create a vegetative barrier, like a fence. A natural fence, it breathes, it's good for the environment, it's good for everybody. They like to look at, you'd rather look at that than a fence. Yet, and it also helps with sound, actually, because they become so tight. That's what type of, when I recommended this, that's what I was kind of thinking of, just to make a comment on this. So that's just something I wanted to say.
Erica, you're on mute. Your phone is on mute.
Sorry, I have muted myself. Kim, maybe make a note on yours, just example, E.G. Arizona cypress. And maybe it's not specific of the type, but just to specify that there are different kinds of vegetative barrier options. Thank you for that, Debbie. Ed Ward.
Thank you. One of the things that we've been able to tie into, and it's yet to be seen how it's going to look out of Fresno, is a Fresno tree initiative. And I want to encourage the group, you know, the dollars and cents that we have need to be handled cautiously and respectfully so that we get the best results for our investment. And one of the things I think we ought to look at places where we can help work with people that are already doing things like the Fresno Tree Initiative. And I think Ryan discussed that. It's really a moving target that changes as we learn, particularly with Fresno's, we learn what their needs were. Then we had to look at what do we have and what do we think the value of that's going to be. I have to tell you from a personal note that I have been pro vegetative barrier for a long time, and I've looked into it, and there are Caltrans has done study after study. Deb, you're right. Some of the conifers act as tremendous barriers, but they actually have lists of vegetation and what's good about it and what's not so good about it. So we don't have to rewrite the book here on this issue. We just need to determine the direction that we do believe in it and want to support it. And then the race is, do we know of anyone else that's doing this? And if not, how do we make it work?
Thank you for that, Ed. And I think, Kim, in terms of that note with Tree Fresno, obviously this is Stockton, we couldn't use them, but there could be another partner that is doing something similar within these boundaries.
Erica,
could we work with them?
Erica, if I can speak to that real quick, and we actually and thankfully have great resources on the steering committee. Kenda is with Puentes, and she has already volunteered to meet with us and chat with us about some of the efforts that they already have going and some of the potential new opportunities that are going. I also want to answer a question. I apologize that we didn't get this emailed out before the meeting. We've been racing, trying to pull all of it together. We have a page, and in some cases, it's a little bit more than a page, for each one of those incentive strategies that Erica showed on the very first slide. And we will have that up on the website, and including any updated comments as we get them, but hopefully have at least this first version up on the website tomorrow sometime. So if you want to go back and look at it and then provide comment to us, you know, ongoing, happy to have that happen.
Jamie, I want to
Awesome.
thank you for that. I also would like to add that it would have been nice to have these in advance, but also I see that the Port of Stockton was a big issue and there were some points of clarifications, a little bit of tension it seemed like when I was studying the notes from the chat last meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend. And it was challenging for me to even read that 30 minutes before this meeting. So I mean, if we're going to have 2 meetings a month, let's please work diligently to make sure that everybody has all the information as soon as possible. Definitely, you know, 72 hours in advance. Like, I understand sometimes it's not possible and we're all doing our best. But like Ed said, you know, we have to handle this money respectfully the best way we can. Yeah.
It is a balancing act. This does have the comments that were received as late as Saturday. So we did pull in the Saturday comments. So we want to balance between giving you all enough time to provide that feedback and then turning. And I also want to apologize. Several of you really struggled with the Excel spreadsheets and that font size. We're done with those for now.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for those comments. I think we're going to have a lot of consensus around vegetative barriers being a priority. It's not the #1, it's in the top definitely 5 or 10. One note in here is that this is vegetative barriers and not sound walls. There is a question in the chat about that that might be helpful to answer in the chat before we move on to the next one. Any last comments on this item before we move to the next one? Debbie, I see your hand. Hi.
Yes. Now, so I hear you saying, you know, we could go to Caltrans, get a list. I heard Ed's comment about getting a list from them about what type of vegetation works best as the barriers. Now, who would do that? And I mean, who does all the, I guess, the running around work as far as trying to gather stuff? Like, do some of us take it upon ourselves to like kind of take a look and see what we can find out, or do you guys do that?
You are more than welcome. There are some experts on this group, and we're happy with any information you can get to us. We are looking at reaching out to the entities that do this type of thing. So what we learned in our meeting with Caltrans earlier this week is that we needed to talk to someone higher up with Caltrans. The reason we started with Caltrans is that the I-5 has been something that got mentioned several times in the comments. So we want to understand better, and we are doing that research to try to understand better what that means. Is it doable? If you know how that all works.
Right, because then we would have to get their agreement that they would be caring for these trees or be in charge of that in some way, probably for eternity, I guess. So
the water issues are important. There are only certain types of vegetations that are allowed, as some folks are relating to. So we are actively trying to get more information from a variety of partners. Caltrans one, the city has been engaged in this conversation, both as it relates to vegetative barriers, but then also as it relates to urban greening, which is coming up. And then looking at, you know, longer term, that maintenance trust was mentioned. And again, it is a balancing act. The funding for incentives, it does need to have a nexus to either mitigating or reducing pollution. So one of the questions is, can we add vegetation to a wall that's existing? Possibly. We need to look into that. Is that going to have enough of a nexus to improve air quality that it will have an impact? Brian Moore is from CARB. He's also here today with us, and he posted in the chat some information about a general rule of thumb about vegetative barriers, higher, denser. Actually, Brian, do a quick 2-second on what you've learned about vegetative barriers.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So, yeah, I won't take up too much time. There are a lot of studies, but the one consistency in the studies are that if the barrier is taller and denser, so you're not seeing through, the foliage, like palm trees don't do a great job. But what was mentioned earlier by the CSC, like really dense vegetation that's tall and it's perpendicular to the prevailing wind, does the best job at lofting any emissions from like the freeway or the stationary source that you're concerned about. It will loft it up in the air and disperse it so the concentration is lower. But if you can make those three things, yeah, taller, denser, and perpendicular to the prevailing wind, that gives you the best shot of having a barrier be really effective at dispersing air pollution. Anybody wants to email me with further questions, yeah.
Thank you for that, Brian. Ed is our last question. We've got lots of comments in the chat, lots of support for vegetative barriers as a measure. We think we are on the right track there, and we're going to move to the next one after Ed's comment.
Thank you, Erica. The only comment that I have is when we know we have projects that are beginning, one of the things that we should leverage is discussion with the leadership of those projects for vegetative barriers. And what comes to mind is we have the rail project coming up. Much of the rail parallels the highway. So there's maybe a dual role that we can play with BNSF and UP as this develops further, and get ahead of it, and again spend our dollars judiciously. Thank you.
So have strong partner discussions and do those proactively to make sure that the money is being utilized as effectively as possible. Got it. Okay, we've gotten through our first measure. We're going to go to the next one. Same general approach, which is take a look at the title. It's not exactly the title or all inclusive, but look at the description. See what's in this. The next one is trees and urban greening. The comments we've received are actually a little less this time. And take a second to read this. Kim, if you wouldn't mind, increase the size of this so people can see it a little bit better. I do see a hand from Bianca. So one quick second, Bianca, we're going to just increase the size. And my question for you, Bianca, is are we talking about the previous measure or on trees and urban greening?
Neither. I was wondering if we could move on to the port because that was a very high area of concern last meeting. And I feel like we didn't get a good amount of time to talk about that. So I was wondering if we could move on to that one instead.
Do you mean the port, a measure related to the port, or the port discussion from last time?
The measure for the port.
Is it one of the top 10? Like, I don't know what order it is. Maybe you can help us, Jamie, and does that make sense to the group?
Yes, it does. And let's see, Bianca's a resident, and there were a lot of concerns about the port at the last meeting, again, from what I read in those notes. And there was an email that was sent out, but just 30 minutes ago or so before the meeting. Is maybe Mr. Wingfield around to just discuss what it said in that email? Because I'm not sure most of us have seen that email before this meeting.
No, I don't know that they were on this call. I can't see on the participant list if he's there. I know that Jamie, you and the IR district team did send an email about the ports. Do you want to provide an update?
There. Yeah, Jeff's here.
Jeff's here.
There we go. Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. You wanted me to elaborate a little bit on my my email that I sent out to the group? Is that the thought? Okay, I'm happy to do that. So I just felt like I went through the whole presentation last time. I didn't really get a chance to spend a lot of time on any measure, but I wanted to kind of really emphasize, I think, reading, thinking back on the time, and I saw a lot of the comments afterwards that we didn't get a chance to elaborate on. But my point was that, I think that the port was not always aware of the community concerns that were out there. And my message just back to you guys was that we're more than happy to, sit down, work with the group here, talk about specific projects as well as bigger measures that the port can implement to reduce emissions on the community. You know, we have worked very hard to remove traffic from the existing Boggs Track neighborhood. And I think one other thing that needs to be understood, and we're still continuing to work to see if we can move more traffic away from that neighborhood. The one issue I think that still will be out there is that a lot of people see, I don't know if you know that Penny Newman Grain is not necessarily, it's not a part of the Port of Stockton. They are a competitor of ours. They're the group that you see right in the channel. And so I don't know that, I'm sure some of the traffic through there gets blamed on us, but and we don't know how we're going to eliminate that. But we are taking measures. As I mentioned, we're working on an emission inventory so that we can be a little bit more proactive and our decisions on what emissions and what equipment that we clean up. I think in the past, we've been very reactive to grant opportunities and things that have come up. And so we're really trying to change that focus a little bit to make good decisions and have the information that we need to make the best decisions. And so that was one of the reasons we're going to reach out and try to form this. Well, we are going to form this community outreach group so that folks, you know, such as here, that want to be in part and be involved with the port and our planning efforts are more than welcome to come and sit down and meet with us and talk through those. Were there any specific questions you had on my presentation or meeting notes?
It looks like Debbie's got a question.
Sure.
Yes, I have a question, Jeff. Yeah, I appreciate getting that email from you. But is it possible for a few of us to come out and actually, we make a time here to actually come out and see what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely.
Actually visualize it and see what would be important to you and how some of these things that we're proposing would affect you, how we could help and work together on this and be able to work together closely. So, you know, to develop some kind of positive relationship.
Yeah.
Way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of, unfortunately, all this, you know, these groups and these meetings happen during COVID. And I feel like a lot of the communication is kind of getting lost with all of, you know, this virtual stuff. But yeah, I'm more than happy to host a group out to come and see what we're doing, to talk about different ideas. And we can try to figure that out. Even with COVID, I think we can do some sort of separation. And we have limited meetings on site right now, but there's an opportunity to do, I think, some work on that in that regard. We'd have to figure kind of out the logistics, but I think we can do that.
I think that would help a lot.
I think so.
Thanks, Jeff and Debbie. Any more questions for Jeff? We do have the port measure up on the screen right now. As I said, it's your meeting and this is number 13 on the list. So maybe we'll talk about ports for a bit. And there might be other measures also that tie to the port activities, but this is one that we see. Mary Elizabeth, question from you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I appreciate all of the efforts that you do. And I believe in your true intent. Was a copy of that email sent to every single commissioner that the city and the county have appointed?
It has not yet, but it definitely can be circulated to them. It was just, it was brought up this afternoon based on so, you know, some comments that felt like they weren't answered from the last committee meeting, and so I just wanted to reiterate some of the feeling and some of the thoughts I had that I didn't really feel got passed over. But I can make sure that they get to the port director and to the commissioners this week.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Jeff, you're going to continue to get questions in the chat. And if you have the flexibility, could you answer those in the chat? I do want to make sure that we stay focused on the SERP and making adjustments to that, but also give you the opportunity to weigh in on some of the things that came in that recent email. And there are some questions specifically directed at you. And if you have the ability after we go through this measure to comment on that, we'd really appreciate it. The measure that you're seeing on your screen right now is trucks and other heavy duty equipment operating at the port. It's about number 13 in the original ordering, but of course, prioritization can shift with the priorities that you have identified based on latest information. Jamie, do you want to give any insights on these, on this measure as it stands right now?
Sure.
Take a shot, or Jamie, you want to go?
Yeah, well, I'll just do my first little intro really quick. So really what this grant program would be about would be taking those heavy duty, a lot of it's mobile vehicles operating around the port. Some are owned by companies that work at the port that have operations at the port. Some are owned by the port themselves, and replacing them with zero emission technology. And if there is not zero emission technology available, near zero emission technology. Ryan.
No, and so, you know, kind of getting back to the tenets and the purpose of AB 617, one of the major focuses of the program is to reduce emissions in the community, and to do it in a quick and expeditious manner. You know, some of the comments we got was definitely, you know, force people to replace existing equipment, and without having mandates to do that, that's often difficult. They are businesses that need to make decisions, and this is an opportunity to potentially help fund to get rid of some of that. This is a measure that was similar to what's been included in, for example, the Bay Area, West Oakland, SERP, also included incentive funding for this type of equipment change out and replacement. It was also in, for example, Long Beach also has a community emission reduction program in South Coast Air Quality Management District. They too have similar things, because the mobile sources are really, if everybody can go back to several months ago, it's probably hard to remember, but we had pictures of where the majority of the makeup of where emissions are coming from in the community. And by far, one of the biggest ones was mobile sources. And so understanding that by reducing the emissions in the community, that will directly impact and improve air quality. That's why you know, we you know, included this, and based on the feedback that we had gotten from people, we included it as a measure in the proposed measure for the SERP.
And one thing I want to piggyback on this, so it's a new strategy that was suggested, and I just wrote it as a new strategy. It's actually the second to last one, and I called it plugins for trucks as they wait to get into the port when they stop to rest. We actually included that type of thing in this strategy. We didn't communicate it well, but that's what we were thinking that and how it works is, so let's say you've got a big truck full of something that's refrigerated, and you have to plug in that refrigeration unit while you're waiting at the port in order to get it loaded or unloaded. There are systems where you can plug in that refrigeration unit or that truck so it doesn't have to idle. So if the committee's up for it, we can actually incorporate that into the strategy, or we can leave it separate.
What are the thoughts there? We've got a couple questions.
Incorporating that only because it is a zero emission strategy. So thank you for that, Jamie.
Excellent. Yeah, it is a zero emission, as in it's not. There's an electric option.
Yeah.
And Todd did write in the chat that zero emission refers to zero tailpipe emissions in vehicles, electric, hydrogen, etc. Near zero refers to ultra low NOx natural gas technology, hybrid, etc., significantly lower than existing diesel standards. We have a few questions on this from Margot, Debbie, and Mary. And before we get to them, there was a question specifically about expansion of the port that I think might be worth answering. I'm not sure who could answer that. Maybe Jeff, you can, about elaborating on the port expansion. And then we'll go to Margot.
Well, I mean, there is still some expansion opportunities at Stockton. I think we have, we took over Rough and Ready Island from the Navy in 2000, and that pretty much tripled the size of the port at that point. We've got probably 600 acres that is still developable out there. We do have some potential projects that we're working through, but those are the types of projects where I want to sit down and talk to, this community outreach group and lay them out, work through any issues that they might see, and make sure that we're growing the port as mindful as we can. Make sure that we're implementing measures that reduce emissions at these new projects, but also kind of most of the, as we replace equipment and make measures. I just got through typing in, one of the things we're trying to do is really eliminate truck traffic moving to the east on West Washington Street. And so one of the things we've considered was closing that road off, because it is a port road between the railroad and Navy Drive, if anyone's familiar with that area. That way we could, and then we would relocate one of our main entrances to the east complex, which is on Harbor, which is right adjacent to some of the homes in that neighborhood. And one of the pictures that Mary Elizabeth had last time, we could eliminate 95% of traffic going through that area. So there is some opportunity to do growth at the port, but we want to do it in a way that is mindful of the community and making sure that we reduce emissions at every opportunity that we can.
Thank you. Margot, Debbie, and then Mary. And we're going to try and finish this, if we can, finish this topic by 6:20. I'm going to try and keep us on track a little bit. But again, if you got a lot of comments, we'll keep going. Margot, you're up.
Yeah, I think this is an important issue. I always wonder how much money that could be used for residents would go to this entity, and how much the port is making it happen with or without us. What kind of regulations have come into being. And I really appreciate that Jeff has outlined the community group. I don't see anything in there that talks about how much power that group would have or what they would entail, but that can be worked on. I just think hearing what the port is working on in terms of conversion to hydrogen fuel is exciting for things at the port. Electric, solar, it's really important. They have a lot of property. And how would you manage the trucking industry into following what our expectations would be? So nothing definite, just food for thought. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Margot.
Debbie,
you're next. Oh, did you have an answer, Jeff?
No, I was just going to say, one of the things that we can do, and one of the things that we're talking about doing is we're also, another group we're forming is internally with some of our tenants or any of our tenants that want to be a part of it. But I think I mentioned at the last meeting that so far we've brought one along kind of as a demonstration, and it's worked out really well. And so we're starting to see more interest. And so we're bringing along more and more tenants to partner in different, whether it's a grant project or just, something that we need to do to that overall benefits the port and our operations and the environment. But let's see, what was I going to say? What was I going to say? That we could incentivize some of our tenants by putting in lease measures and specific benefits to them if they do use zero or near zero emission equipment where available. And so that's something that we're talking about, and and I mentioned, we're doing a strategic plan. And so that would go into kind of development of the strategic plan, is really trying to incentivize new operations at the port to put in the best technology possible and zero emission anywhere that it's potentially available.
Real quick,
Great,
Erica,
thank you.
I'm going to jump in. We have a question from a member of the public on that's been communicated, and if Todd can answer it, the question is, isn't diesel replacement funding existing funding, or are we funding existing programs with AB 617 dollars?
Hi, Matt. This is Todd DeYoung with the Air District. It's a good question. And so there are various programs out there that fund diesel replacement in different areas and different options. And we do take advantage of those in the district. That's local, state, federal funding. There are opportunities for that. What this funding would be is targeted funding for fleets that operate and are domiciled within the Stockton community boundaries. Generally speaking, our programs are severely oversubscribed, meaning we have way more applications than we have available funding. This funding would be designated for the community, so they would have immediate access to those funds. So they essentially wouldn't go into the queue of applications that we have district-wide. It would be designated funding for trucks that operate in the area.
And just to piggyback on that, because there were some questions in some of the comments about exactly this type of thing, and we've discussed it a couple of times, but it's worth repeating. It means that Stockton moves to the top of the list, and or we do more in Stockton. So an example of doing more is usually we have one of our smog check tune-in repair events in Stockton a year. We would do multiple, however many the committee wanted, of these events during the course of the year. So it either Stockton moved to the top of the list, or more of whatever it is gets done.
And just to piggyback on that just a little bit more is these are really community designed programs. So where our district-wide program may have certain criteria, funding levels, funding limits. If your desire in the community is to say have potentially higher funding amounts for truck replacement within the community, that makes people more interested, more willing to participate. That's also an advantage of this funding versus sort of the traditional district funding.
Hey, Todd, did I apologize if I missed this. Did you talk about like the other programs are first come, first serve, and then there's a long waiting list? You did cover that? Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, that we have an existing queue of applications.
Yeah.
That were oversubscribed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. There are a lot of questions in the chat. If there are ones that you can answer via chat, please do, so that we can keep going. I see Debbie, Mary, and Noemi with their hands up. And if we're talking about this item in particular, actually, we're going to go out of order just because I think Noemi hasn't asked a ton of questions. You want to go first?
Sure, thank you. And I'm sorry to Mary Elizabeth and Debbie. Quick question.
We'll get to them, don't worry.
Thank you. A quick question for Jeff, if you would, please. So I'm wondering about things like environmental impact reports. So if there's an expansion in the plans, or you have 600 acres of developable land, what happens with, like, is there like a report or something that's done, a study before a new company comes in? I seem to remember hearing something about like environmental something. I can't even remember.
Yeah, there's one of the things that we did in the mid 2000s was we did a programmatic environmental impact report for the entire development of Rough and Ready Island. And so we looked at the full build out. And so what we do now is if we analyze a project and they come in, we compare their impacts to what we analyzed in that environmental impact report. And if they fit within the parameters and what was analyzed previously, then we certify what's called an addendum to that environmental impact report. And if they do not, then we would have to go out and do most likely a supplemental environmental impact report. And that would go out for full public review And so yes, environmental impact reports or environmental analysis are done for every port project, except, well, the one that Mary Elizabeth pointed out last time is the only one that started before their environmental impact report was adopted by our board.
Oh,
And that
may I
was,
ask, has an environmental impact report ever been done before for existing companies? Are they done on a schedule, or had us not become an AB 617 committee, would we have really looked at the port? Would have anybody have looked at the port and the emissions coming from the companies there?
yes, we have done and have been doing environmental impact reports or environmental studies on any project that goes for our board that requires an action by our board. Has to have a CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act requirements fulfilled. And so we look at the impacts of each project before it goes to our board. So yes.
Okay, so yes, there is some kind of schedule even without AB 617.
Correct.
Got
Yes.
it. Okay, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'll tell you that AB 617 has done, though, is kind of, although we were looking at different, the CARB is looking to go to zero emission for ports by 2030. So we have started that program already, but one of the things that kind of spurred us was to do an emission inventory. So that's kind of a real focused analysis that the port is doing to look at its own operations and their tenants' operations to figure out ways that we can, and to figure out where we can identify measures that we need to improve. So that kind of was spurred by the AB 617 group.
Nice, thank you for that. I see Jonathan asked a question there that really speaks to me here. Who's involved in that environmental impact report? Are there any neighboring communities like the Boggs Tract people? Are they involved in any way?
They really aren't now, and that's kind of where my my email came from. Is that we did not hear from the community previous, but that's not a bad thing in my opinion. If they, I mean, I'm excited to be able to work with the community and get their input on specific projects and make sure that we're respecting each other. And the last thing we want to do is be a bad neighbor. And so to have Boggs Tract wanting to be involved, we're more than happy to work with them through any project development.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Naomi.
Erica, just real quick, because there have been a couple of questions, some public questions, and Mary Elizabeth, I think it was Mary Elizabeth mentioned it as well. We'll get a new version of this out too, with the original funding amount, the funding amount based on that. Remember that exercise that you guys did where you decided how much you wanted to spend and where you wanted to spend it and that type of thing. And then communicate that as well, because a lot of these funding amounts have changed. And then we didn't put it in here, but there are certain, like locomotives were originally one of these strategies, and we just took that out. If we hear you want to put locomotives back in, but we saw everyone said that locomotives get $0. So we just took that out. So if we'll get another version out that communicates kind of how the dollars changed, but this is just kind of the first step in this kind of refining process of getting further and further down the road.
Thanks, Jamie, for that clarification. And I just want to say this is a work in progress, and you guys are doing really well. We're going back and forth based on what you want to see and want to hear. We're going slowly. We've only gone through 1.5 measures so far, and we still have a question from Mary Elizabeth, which I definitely want to get to. But I want to acknowledge that there is one thing we definitely want to do by about 6:45 at the latest. So we want to swap over to the air monitoring update just to make sure we hit that before our 7 o'clock cutoff. So Mary Elizabeth, I'm going to go to you and then acknowledge that we will kind of switch gears a little bit when we get to that 6:40, 6:45 timeframe. Mary Elizabeth.
Debbie has a question too, so we'll go to Debbie. She's waving.
Oh, Debbie's hand's down. Sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to ask Jeff. So I wanted to be clear. So when you do a CEQA report, does that get published then? Or how do you let Box Track people know that there's something to look at and get involved in?
It is published. You know, we file them with the county, we file them with the state, and I know that we haven't done the best job of putting them on our website, but we are doing that as well. I'd have to go back and check and see how caught up we are on our website, but that's the only method right now. That, and it would be also put out on our notifications for our board meetings. That would be the ways that they could access them.
Could you make a promise to this committee that you would do that in the future from now on, be on top of that, and I guess post that regularly prior so they can comment to you?
Yes, to get
if
them on the web,
necessary.
to get the promise to put them on our website.
Yes,
Yes, I will do that. I'll make that promise.
perfect. And then also, how soon are you looking to be doing this rerouting on Washington?
I'm hoping very, very soon. I'm pushing it with our real estate folks. I think that some coordination with the city needs to happen. But I believe some of it already has, to be able to close that off. There probably needs to be some noticing just to make sure that you know, we're making it clear that no through traffic will be allowed on Washington. But I don't see that as being a big deal. So I would think that if we started working very hard on it today, we could probably get it done in 2021. But I don't know of any serious hurdles that we would have to cross. I don't know if
And
anybody
then
in the city would
oh,
want to.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
And then lastly, this is to the air board. How much is of this $8,000 is do we I guess, do we pay for all of that, or is that not even decided right now? Do we pay for all of one item or all of 5 items or whatever? Is that what this $8,000 is? Is that what the way I'm understanding?
And just to make sure everyone is clear, it's $8 million.
I mean, 8 million. I'm sorry.
And we haven't landed on that. This is just a place where we started, and you guys could say that we specifically want to work on the what we call the TRUs, the what does it stand for? Refrigeration units?
Transport refrigeration units.
Thank you. And that you just want to do transport refrigeration units and you just want to do electric. That's definitely a possibility. And, you know, as we continue to discuss this, that's what we want to hone in on.
And then you'll tell us how much each of these are, right?
We can. In that first spreadsheet, we did have some of that information. So again,
there was a small amount.
Right. If you go back, and they're all on the website, but that first spreadsheet gave you kind of some of a cost per unit on some of these, and then the emissions benefit. On the port stuff, we haven't really kind of zeroed in on what actual pieces of equipment that might be. And maybe that's the next iteration of this, is that we explain if we were to do, you know, electric charging infrastructure for XYZ and then swap out a certain number of whatever for whatever, that we can come back to you with a little bit more of a more specific strategy. But we didn't want to do that until we got a little bit of a discussion going on about some of these.
Yeah,
and that's where I'm thinking Jeff can help with that. Sorry, that's where I'm thinking Jeff can help with that input on that.
just to point out that this one is really about mobile sources at the ports. There's one that's also about tugboats, which is similar to, I think, one that happened in one of the other steering
It
committee.
happened in Long Beach.
And then there's one about marine intake bonnets, which is what I take to be a little hat that goes on top of some source and takes all the emissions away.
So real quick, Debbie, just to kind of give a little bit of background on the way that, kind of going back to what I said earlier, wanting to have some flexibility with the measures, with the funding amount. Like, you know, for example, the other ones I've seen like this in other port SERPs, you know, when they're looking at equipment, they're kind of looking at it holistically with lots of different potential pieces of equipment, understanding that once we get into the implementation phase, you know, you know, that's when we spend a lot of time working with whoever's going to be replacing equipment, in this case, the port, and then, you know, talking with the community. Where it's important to get the community's feedback is the types of things that they're willing to put and include in that. So.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that helps. Yeah.
All right, Mary Elizabeth has had the patience of Job. Mary, you are up.
Oh, no, thank you. You compliment me. So Jeff, you did make a promise, and I just want to kind of make a little bit of accountability. You made that promise back in May after the New Start project. So I'd like you to see that, you know, not only post those environmental documents on your website, but to notice them in a port agenda so that there is no confusion about the possibility that a port director may be uninformed. So I'd like a promise on that, but I actually raised my hand because the port is doing a strategic plan. And I would like to see some consideration for your consultant that is preparing that plan to take time not only to meet with the commissioners, to meet with the community members, to get their perspective and to document that within the strategic plan process. Thank you.
Okay. Can I ask a clarifying question just on the, when you say a notice our CEQA documents in a port agenda? Is that what you?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I'm going to follow up with you on that, but just to make sure I understand and I'm clear on what you mean. But yes,
thanks, Mary Elizabeth, and thanks, Jeff.
I take that note. I think that's probably a good idea for the to hear from the community on the strategic plan as well. That's another thing I at least mentioned in my response today, was that, you know, we are really going to be, you know, this is something the port hasn't done in a long time. And so it is going to be good timing, I think, to incorporate a lot of our emission reduction goals into the big picture of what we're aiming to do at the port.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so I have some good news, and then I have some other news. The good news is we got a lot of really good comments and discussions around the port. I know there was a huge conversation at the last meeting, some unanswered questions that I think many have been answered via email and some in person today. So this is really great. And Jeff, I think you're getting a lot of kudos in the chat on that response and your interest in engaging the community engagement committee that you're going to have, ways that you're going to do public noticing. There are lots of notes currently in this SERP discussion, but I think some of the notes that Kim has written are probably not super specific to the SERP itself and the measure itself, because there are a couple other measures that may be relevant. So we're going to do some screening with the Air District to make sure that it's all appropriate. We'll keep the comments, we'll keep the notes, we'll make sure those are tracked, but they may not specifically be relevant to this SERP measure. That said, conversation really good. Anybody have any last questions for Jeff before we move on to the air monitoring topic and then jump back to the SERP? any more questions for Jeff? And there are still some in the chat that I think Jeff's going to answer, but are there any additional questions for Jeff about the port, about the email if you had a chance to read it, or anything else related to this topic? Okay, I'm seeing none.
I have a question. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, hi, Jonathan. Go ahead.
Just for Jeff, so the land for the port is where it hits into the security line, and then the competitors are outside of the port. Is that correct?
Correct. So yeah, if you're driving, a lot of people, they see those big silos, the big white silos that you see on the off the freeway.
Yeah.
Those are not part of the Port of Stockton.
Okay.
We have to work with them sort of like they are, but they are one of our competitors, and that just is what it is. When people see them, they think it's the port all the time. But so yes, it's if you're coming in on Harbor, accessing the East Complex secure area, the line is right there where it's a little bit before where our security gate is. Does that make sense?
Isn't Harbor where Penny Newman is?
Yes.
In Lehigh. So for those who don't know, that's when you go on Fresno Avenue. After you pass the restaurant Taqueria, you keep on going down straight on that road, and you go towards where the railroads are and the big, tall, I guess they're grain containers, wherever they are. That way, there's another entrance to the port that way.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're looking to close. I'm looking to reroute, and I think a few things have come to light recently that are going to allow us to do that. So I'm pushing very hard for that to happen sooner rather than later.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jeff. You've taken a ton of questions, and we appreciate you kind of being available for those. Additional questions for Jeff, do us a favor and drop them in the chat. He's been very active in responding to those, and there's a couple, I think, stragglers in there still too, Jeff, so we appreciate you following up on those. Really, really great conversation. Okay, so I want to pivot us just briefly to the monitoring. And I know we have Chai's here to talk to us a little bit about monitoring. We're going to jump back to the SERP and go back through as many as we can with the time allotted, but let's cover and have some discussion around the air monitoring plan.
All right.
Chai on the line. There he is. Hi there.
And good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody, and I hope you're all doing well. So for your review, we emailed you the draft community air monitoring plan about 2 weeks ago. And this plan is really a culmination of all the work that you have done over the past few months. Just a quick recap of how we got to this plan. We started the process in May, talking about what a plan is. In June, we identified the sources of concern within the community. July, we went over a map of the impacts of various pollutants throughout the community and all the health impacts and indicators like asthma. In July, in August, then we went over the proposed monitoring where the general location we would want to have those particular type of monitor, what types of pollutants to monitor, and what type of equipment that we would use. And in September, Glenabelle and Gloria actually from the Southside Stockton Youth did a presentation on air quality, and we found that their recommendations were fairly consistent with what we had proposed in the monitoring. So putting all of that together, putting all your input in there and all the hard work that you have put into this effort, that resulted into the plan that we sent out to you about 2 weeks ago. And so really a huge thanks to all of you. That was definitely a lot of work for your hand in developing this plan. And so although when we sent the email out, we had mentioned that the commenting period would end tomorrow, but we would really like to start implementing this process as soon as possible, finding the locations, getting permission to install the equipment, all the logistics. That really takes a lot of time based on our experience with the Shafter community and also the Fresno community. So we really like to get a head start onto that. And so far we have received some comments, but they're primarily really more on the clarifications, not really any major fundamental changes into this plan. So if the steering committee, if there are no major objections, we would like to move forward with the process of implementing this plan. So wanted to get that feedback from all of you, or if you have any other questions.
Does anyone have questions or comments about the monitoring plan as presented a couple weeks ago? Jonathan.
I'm sorry, this is Margot. The discussion was, the sound was really spotty. I'm not quite sure what you're asking of us regarding this plan, Chad.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Hopefully everybody else heard me, or was it spotty throughout the whole conversation?
I heard you fine, so it might just be Margot, but it certainly doesn't hurt repeating.
Yeah. I'll just give a quick brief summary of what I just said. So basically we sent over the draft community air monitoring plan, which is basically nothing really has changed a whole lot, other than we just added the details into it to make it a full plan, and everything else, the core of it is really what you have already seen, what we have been discussing for months now, in identifying different sources of concern, where we want to put the monitors, what type of monitors we want there. And so now that we have this plan that we just that was recently emailed out, we really want to move forward with starting this. But before we can do that, we need to really get the blessing of the steering committee onto that. So just wanted to get feedback from you that if there really is no major concern that you're seeing in this plan, then we would like to move forward with it. So just wanted that feedback from all of you.
And then Jonathan, you had a hand.
Go ahead, Margaret.
Sorry,
Margaret.
last sentence. Again, that last sentence kind of dropped off. I couldn't hear what you were asking us to do.
So just getting feedback from you. If you don't have any major objections to what you've seen in the plan, then we would like to move forward with it.
I do see Dylan dropped in the comments that he's not ready to move forward with the vote, and that, you know, if Dylan, if you can share with us kind of what things you want us to discuss with the committee, and you know, we can look to put that together. I see Ned also wants additional time to provide comment and understand. We did say tomorrow was the deadline, Ned.
So just to clarify, we've got a couple hands up, Jonathan, Debbie, and Mary. Jonathan's been up for a while. And to clarify to his point, the deadline is tomorrow. The comments received so far have not been, they've been clarifying, but not directly substantive in terms of changing direction. But it looks like, Jonathan, why don't we go with you, and then we'll continue to review the chat for other questions that we can speak out loud about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just to let you guys know, you'll be surprised. There will be residents, or there'll be even CBOs that will come in with one day with some questions, with some comments. So they'll provide them. So don't worry. Tomorrow's the deadline. We will make it by tomorrow. My question is, so for the camp, all these acronyms, it's the map, correct? If we're basing it based off the map, could we please share the map on the screen just for clarification for people to know? And on that map, does it describe which air monitor will specifically go in that spot?
Yeah, actually it is. Let me see if I can quickly open it up here. And you know, that map is really the same map that we had worked together on, and we had the discussion on already. Let me get to the right.
Can we please see it?
We're just really fleshing out all the details on it. Let me share my screen here.
Mary has it handy. She's showing it to us, but we cannot see Mary.
Do you see it here?
Yes.
We do.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Chai?
Let me zoom in. Is that a little bit better? So this is pretty much the same map that we had talked about, I think about a month or two ago, that we had put together, and we had a discussion on, you know, if this would be appropriate, if these locations, and just also keep in mind that these are general locations. Once it's agreed upon, if everyone's good with it, we're still going to have to find the exact location and get permission and all of that.
So Ty, can we, there's a question in here about PM01, and I'm just making, and maybe he means PM10, I'm not sure if that's a typo or not, but I want to clarify the question from Ned. And
Can you hear me?
A little
hi,
bit.
barely.
Just barely hear me. Can you hear me better now? All I wanted to do is take a little more time because, you know, it's a very fine PM particulates that are of some interest. I do applaud the idea of the trailer at Washington Elementary School, but I could just use that extra day. And folks, you need to know the costs of all these things to make some rational decisions about how much, where does this make sense? So those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ned. You know, these, as far as, I mean, there is some flexibility into these. You know, when we start these monitoring here, if we find that, you know, there's another location here that we really need to monitor, I mean, we can still adjust that as needed.
Debbie has a question about this.
Actually, that was my question. I wanted a map and just to show where the locations were. That's all I needed. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Mary and then Willie.
Thank you. So I just wanted to call everyone's attention to page 7 and this statement. Given the size of the community, the number of pollutants of concern, and the variety of local emission sources, the community monitoring program will operate air monitoring equipment that is scalable, portable, and provides real-time data to enable the district to constantly adapt to community concerns and quickly respond to impacts. So my question is, like, how often are we going to be having this data to be responding to? That was my main question.
Yeah, so the way that it's set, I'll go back to the map here. So that's why we have various types of equipment. You know, we have the van where it goes there. We can have it a couple hours there, or we can leave it overnight at various locations and capture those just 1 or 2 times or 3 or 4 times. And then we have the trailer and the smaller compact systems. Those, I mean, they're semi-portable. So let's say we put it at Washington Elementary and we monitor there for a few months and then realize and find out that, okay, you know, there's another area, some other place that we feel we really need to that type of equipment to monitor maybe some other different types of pollutants elsewhere. You know, we can transition that, and that's really based upon whatever the needs are for the community. We have that flexibility. So, I mean, right up front now, we're not going to say, you know, we're going to have a trailer here for 1 month and then we're going to move a trailer here the next month or so. The only thing that actually will be moving quite a bit more is going to be the van.
So one other thing, Mary, it'd be, if anybody wants to see, maybe we could have included this as part of this presentation, is showing the community what it looks like in South Central Fresno, where we've got a lot of this equipment up. And we actually have a specific air monitoring page for that community that has all the individual monitors, and it's providing real-time data in the community.
So thank you for that, Ryan. And I just want to, there's a couple questions in the chat that I think are being answered, and I appreciate that. Willie and Noemi have questions on the hand raised line. Question for you though, Ty. If the community says, yeah, generally we're okay with this, but we want to wait until tomorrow, you know, what does that mean that you do? So with a green light from this CSC, what does that mean? Or a general green light, maybe not specific. What does that mean you do?
Yeah, so if we can get the general green light on this, that way we can start looking at these locations and looking for potential locations, start communicating with, once we find potential locations in these areas, communicating with them to see the permission, if we can get permission to get to those areas. You know, based on our experience in Fresno and in Shafter, and that can actually take quite a bit of time to get to some of these organizations, asking permission, getting the contract agreements and all of that into place. So I think that's one of the main things.
So the green light gives you the opportunity to explore a little bit more of the areas on this map and see where you can go from here. Does it rubber stamp this entire plan, all 32 pages? Is it done and never to be touched again, or is it? Can we continue to edit it?
No, this is something that's somewhat of a live document, and we know that as we start this process, if there are things that we find out or things that we learn that it's going to be that we need to modify this, and if the steering committee feels that this needs to be updated here and there, you know, I think it's definitely flexible enough where we can still do that part of it.
Erica, I'm going to take 1 minute and 40 seconds and just show everybody what this means on the ground. Can I share my screen, please?
Yeah. And then I want to acknowledge Willie, Noemi, and Cynthia. I see your hands. We're going to let Jamie jump in, and then we'll jump back to you. While she's doing that, I also want to flag that as we thought, we're going a little over time. We hope that's okay for those of you that have a little bit of a cutoff at 7. We are going to continue going, and we're going to come back to the item of how to address the SERP at the end of this discussion. So stay tuned. Yes, we can.
All right, hopefully you'll hear it too. I'm going to give it one shot. If it doesn't work, we won't go. I'm going to have Heather yell at me if she cannot hear it.
So I'm actually sitting in one of our mobile air monitoring vans for the community air monitoring program for both the South Central Fresno community and the Shafter community, which are both part of AB 617. Everything we're doing as a part of this community air monitoring network that we're designing for both Fresno and Shafter has really been a direct result of working with the community members, working with the steering committee in deciding where and how we should place these monitors throughout the community. Taking all these different concerns in really means that we have to have a monitoring network that allows us to be portable and scalable and really respond to a lot of the different concerns throughout the community. So we are operating 2 mobile air monitoring vans, and that's going to really allow us to kind of monitor the whole gamut of all of the different pollution types that we're looking for. We also have 2 fully capable air monitoring trailers, again, one for each community, and these are huge. We're trying to monitor a lot more compounds than we would with the monitoring vans or even with our stationary air monitoring sites that we do throughout the valley. We also have 3 compact monitoring systems, 2 of which will be in Fresno and 1 will be in Shafter. And then we have tons of new real-time PM 2.5 monitors that we're placing throughout the region. And all of these are going to be real-time reported back to the district and then directly reported to our website, which will allow the community to understand in real time 24/7 what these monitors are picking up in a much more comprehensive way than we've ever done before.
That's all.
All right, thank you, Jamie. That was extremely helpful and very short.
Okay, I'm going to take on.
And I know that
Go
we
ahead,
have one more day for everybody to provide those comments in there, but the reason for that is that we don't want to delay this for another month and after that too, just to get a final response from the committee before we start moving forward with it. And again, if there were some comments, we can always still update some aspects of the plan afterwards as well.
I'm definitely seeing that there is an apprehension around saying green light on the document right now because they haven't had a chance to really look at it. They did want that last day. But it sounds like they have the flexibility to, raise a red hand and say, stop, 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 if they're feeling really apprehensive. Willie, go ahead and give your question if you would.
Yeah, Che, thanks for putting this to the group. I have 2 questions. When reviewing the report, one of the questions for me, or pretty prevalent throughout the report was understanding that there are standards to how we're monitoring. There are best practices in how other communities are monitoring. What I found lacking from the report was exactly what is that data going to be used for? Is it going to be influencing budget? Is it going to be influencing dollar amounts towards a particular project? I understand that it's part of better creating these data sets that are helpful for the community to make decisions. But I think if we are able to put a more tangible, specific purpose on who's going to use the data sets, how do they use it, what are examples of how they use it in the past, and how has it driven decisions in the past, I think that would give more context about why it's important and the accuracy and the efficacy of it. So I think that's what I was looking for in the report that I didn't see. And I know you mentioned it's a working document. I think examples of what that would look like other than these, web portals where we're able to see the concentration, like that's interesting to me as a resident, but I can't do anything with that data point other than speak to my neighbor about it. Like, I'm kind of curious from an enterprise perspective, how are other, I don't know, nonprofits or senators or other, how is it going to be used in a real life application is my curiosity.
Yeah, I think you almost pretty much answered a lot of them too, of the various uses that it could be for, and it does have a wide variety of uses. And originally, I mean, really intended for the to help support the community on these issues. I think the first part is we need to understand what are the emission concerns and really validate that and see what extent those issues are, and then of course that could lead to various things like you had just mentioned on how do we get that addressed. I mean, if we see very high readings at one of these sites, there's a lot of things that it could result in, including investigating, what is causing that, and how do we reduce those impacts or reduce those emissions.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of variety on that.
Yeah, to your point, I think it's great that we're logging that data. Obviously, if we don't have that historical context, it's great. If there's a way to put a dollar value, if there's a way to put an actual incremental impact on how that's going to influence decisions or how it has done so in other communities, that would be interesting. The other question I wanted to ask was, I think based on the image that was shown on the screen, it was about 20 to 30 different sites. What I'm intrigued about is when reading the report, there is an action that says, upon approval, we will reach out to property owners, property managers to set up a testing module on their property. My question is, let's say, for example, you go out there, you have 30 proposed sites, you talk to all the property owners, property managers, you only get 5 of those. So those 5 that you actually get make the map look a lot different than the initial plan. So how do we ensure that there is that the end result after talking to property owners, property managers looks similar to the original plan approved, and it's not just a result of property owners that you've gotten approval from or property managers you've gotten approval from and what was easy to access, but it actually reflects what we originally agreed to in the plan?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I think what we can do is just looking at what we have done in Fresno and Shafter. So the goal is to really get all these air monitors into all these locations. And we've had very similar goals just like this in Fresno. And there are certain areas that we have difficulty getting air monitors to that specific area. And for example, maybe at a school where the steering committee says, we really want it at this school. And so we say, okay, let's go and shoot for that. And we go through the process, and the school is decided that they're not willing to allow us to do it there. So what we've done in those cases are, we can use a van temporarily to monitor nearby that area, because that is an area of concern by the committee. And then we'll look at other potential areas around there, nearby there, and try to get something that's close to that vicinity. So, I mean, the goal really is these are the areas, and we're going to try to make sure that we get monitoring at all.
Hey, Willie, on that point, so we had an example of this in Fresno. There was a specific school site that the community had identified that they wanted to put a monitor, and we went to the board meetings, we had conversations with the school. Ultimately, the school board voted not to put it there. They didn't want it there. We immediately searched out additional locations, brought that back to the steering committee with a recommended site where we did get approval. And the steering committee took a look at where that was in proximity to where they wanted it, and they did give us approval to do that. So I mean, that's the kind of the flexibility that we're utilizing in this process.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Jay, for the context. I think that is exactly the kind of situation I'm envisioning. For example, I know a lot of those sites are near the port. If you're not able to get an actual location to secure near the port, I would love if you were able to bring that back to the community to make a decision at that point. But understood that you're going to try to make your best effort to try to stay within the plan as possible. So thanks for the context.
Yeah, and definitely, and as we go through this process and we have these meetings, we will continually provide an update to the steering committee so that you can see what the progress is, where the challenges are, and if we need to make any changes, we'll bring that back to the committee and get your input and your guidance as well.
I'm seeing 2 questions or hands raised. Noemi is first, and then Cynthia. And there's still a number of items in the chat and some great conversation happening in there, and questions and answers.
Yes, thank you. When I raised my hand, I was wondering about the formality of our meeting in wanting to green light or do a preliminary vote for Chai to go ahead and start investigating sites. I'm just going to ask for a little bit more formality from whoever's in charge of running the meetings. I honestly don't know who it is, but just, agendas in advance, paperwork in advance, whatever pertinent information in advance. When we're going to be asked to vote, I'd like for that to be mentioned specifically on the agenda, very clearly, just action item or vote, something like that. Yeah, I'm going to ask for that. And then in the chat over here, I was having a little side thing happening. I'm a little confused now about the air monitoring data and how it will not or will be community owned. And so I wanted to ask Matt to just jump in and talk about that, if he wouldn't mind, since he seems to know a little bit about this, and I really want to make an informed decision here.
Yeah, I'll make it brief. I appreciate the chance to talk here. We were fortunate in the Richmond-San Pablo study area to be awarded 2 community air grants within the Blueprint community. And so our nonprofit owns its own remote sensor network, which collects the same level of data as this study area. And we did it for about 800 grand. We trained community residents, and we have world-class scientists verifying the data. And it's owned by a nonprofit. It was adopted by the local air district as part of their camp. So there's definitely a way to, train people so that they, this is a workforce development opportunity as well as a community ownership, and it helps keep it in line with, the spirit of the Assembly bill. I love air districts all over California and the Air Resources Board, but the legislation was very much written to address the failure of local air districts to address granular air pollution within communities. And so, funneling more cash into the old structure seems to be missing the point of the legislation. So there's tons of overlap opportunity, and we met a ton of resistance in the Bay Area. So this isn't, unique to Stockton, but I think, I think there can be more community leadership and more community possession of this process, which I think will help the air district in the long run. It would be a shame to get down the road and find out that you have a community air monitoring plan that doesn't have community input and is legally actionable after the fact. That would be a shame and a huge loss of cash, which Stockton can't afford.
And Barb may be able to weigh in, but I feel like there is a nonprofit that has a grant to do this valley-wide. Is that correct, Trish? Do you remember? Does the CCAC grant, is it valley-wide?
Yeah, the Central California Asthma Collaborative also received grants in 2018 and 2019, and they had proposed to cover 8 counties in the air district. Yes.
And I think at one point, I feel like we had a representative from CCAC. Can't remember. Oh, well.
No, doesn't look like. Okay.
I think it's good for the
So thank you for that. Thanks. All right, Cynthia Pinto, sorry. Cynthia, you're up.
No worries. I just had some quick questions about the data review and flagging process. I was able to read the monitoring plan, and it just seemed really vague. I have a couple questions on the flagging process. What's first off, like, what is being flagged? Is it just one pollutant specific? Is it all the pollutants? What's being flagged? Are all the monitors going to have flagging capabilities? And what's the timeline looking like when something is flagged, when a flag is triggered, how fast are community residents going to be notified, and what's the process for that? I felt like that process could be hashed out a little bit more. So I have some questions. Those are my questions.
Yeah, so the purpose of the flagging is that, you know, for example, if something happens and you see like a reading that's just skyrocketing or something, but that's really due to some type of a malfunction. And so flagging is just going back in and making sure that the data is flagged so that it doesn't come out and it doesn't get retained, shown as a very high reading when that really is an invalid data point. And so the flagging is really just to invalidate data that's due to either the maintenance of it. It could be that because these units are constantly running and constantly generating the data. So when staff goes in, let's say they do maintenance for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, that data gets flagged immediately so that it doesn't get transmitted out as a valid data. And that's what flagging is generally used for. It's not to notify, it's not really meant that you know, we get an extremely high value and there is something that is unsafe within the area that the community needs to be informed of, and that we would flag that. It's not meant as a notification in that way. It's really just flagging the data to identify that it's an invalid data point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I definitely did not capture that from the paragraph that was in the monitoring plan. So thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
So it looks like there has been a thank you to Trish for giving some specifics on the Central California Asthma Collaborative as it relates to that air monitoring data and community engagement there, specifically around data collection. So that's noted in the chat. And then there was another hand up that I don't see now. I don't know if that's because the hand is down or the hand is has been removed by somebody on our team. Is there any other questions on this item before I kind of circle back and kind of clarify what I think I'm hearing from the larger committee?
Erica, I think that hand was from Debbie, so I don't know if her question maybe got answered.
Thank you, Debbie. It did. Okay, perfect. So one of the things that I feel like I'm hearing on this issue is that there were a lot of comments made today, questions asked today. I know Ty was taking lots of notes. There are some people that have said in the chat and verbally that they'd like a little bit more time, that extra 1 day, to go through and provide their feedback. Totally hear and understand that. We've also heard that maybe from a structure standpoint, when there is a vote related to something specific, that there's more clarity on the agenda so people come prepared to review that information in advance. Have heard that as well. Definitely hearing that there's community input, additional community input potentially needed, whether that's built into the overall process or if that's specific to this document. We've noted that as well. From what I can gather, this committee doesn't feel quite ready to vote yet. It seems like we're more interested in giving a little bit more time to weigh in. We will reinforce, though, as relates to that there is a deadline of tomorrow, and it's very likely that we will have another meeting in November to go over not only potentially this item, but also the CERT. So what I'd like to transition us to is a question on process, just to help make this committee feel more in sync with how the rest of this goes. You want, from what I'm hearing, a lot of time and energy and space around reviewing documents and understanding expectations before meetings, and then being given the time and flexibility. We didn't vote today with that in mind, and I think that's okay. I don't think we're behind in any way, but I do want to get a sense from this committee how we can move forward with voting in a way that makes you feel like you've got enough information to do that. So let's start with this air monitoring plan. A lot of you have seen it. You've had a couple weeks to look at it. Some of you have provided feedback, which has been fantastic. Additional comments came in today, also fantastic. Tomorrow's the deadline for public comment. At the next meeting, let's say we have one in November, will the committee feel comfortable with voting on that plan at that time? And can I get a thumbs up, or let's say with thumbs up, just a reaction button, thumbs up, if you feel like the next meeting we'll have that. I'm seeing lots of those. Yes, yes, yes. The comfort level will be there. So in anticipation of another meeting in November, if we can get that on the agenda, there is a comfort that that'll give enough time and flexibility for everybody to have seen the comments, weighed in, and had this discussion. Feeling good about that. Okay. So Chai, not quite yet, but almost. The next meeting, they expect to hear from the committee, and we'll do, according to the charter, 50% plus one of voting members to decide to move forward. If we need to go that formal, that's how the approach will be done, and we'll structure it accordingly. So you've got another day to give feedback and then plan for that at the next meeting. Is this still subject to be edited even after voting? The answer is yes. From what I heard from Chai, this is a fluid document. It's going to be edited as needed based on feedback he gets from other stakeholders, potential sites. Nothing's really stamped and stuck in cement with this process. So we've got a little bit more time. Catherine says she'd like to see everyone's comment on the CERP measures and monitoring plan well in advance to make an informed decision. Makes sense. Let's separate the two. So number one is the air monitoring plan. That's one Chai's working on. It's farther along than the CERP, certainly. Chai, can you talk to us a little bit about, after tomorrow, you're going to get feedback from the public and whoever else. Is there another opportunity for you to send another version to this committee before they have to give a green light?
Yeah, I think we can send another version, and we can send all the comments that we received as well.
Great. And then the request on that is that it goes at least 72 hours in advance of the date of this meeting, the next meeting, so that there's time to review. That is not that much time for review, guys. So just make a note that 72 hours, the DARE district's working really hard, but 72 hours will be the timetable, hopefully, for that coming to you before the next meeting. So that's number one. Let's move quickly. And I see, Willie, I do see your hand. We're going to move to the CERP process because we got through 1.5 measures today, and there's 25 of them on this part, and then there's another set as well. It felt a little clunky in terms of review and process, and we're going to still have to go in and vote. So what I want to talk to you guys about is, do we need longer meetings? Do we need more meetings? Do you want to just review them privately and send feedback in and go over that way? Let's think about that for a second. I'm going to take Willie's question, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah, I can't speak for the group. I'll speak for my own personal experience, but I was in that leadership meeting. The subject of voting on this was not brought up in the leadership meeting as an agenda item for today's meeting. So I think that's where that's where I personally don't feel comfortable with voting. I know you guys have sent multiple emails about getting for feedback, but nowhere in those emails does it say that we're going to have a date of 11/4 to have a vote. Take up time from the meeting for voting. So I understand that your team is trying to push to make a decision. Obviously, we don't want to delay. So we want to get the data as soon as possible and secure the sites as soon as possible. But if we have a leadership meeting to make up an agenda and it's not brought up and then this pops up on the agenda, then I don't think it's reasonable to expect the group to vote on that and be prepared to vote on that. And then second, like I mentioned, if there were more notions and more communication on the email to say that 11/4, 30-45 minutes of the agenda will be used to have a discussion about voting, I think that would give us a little bit more time and preparation to actually make that decision. So those are just some comments I wanted to bring up to make it a more effective meeting.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it sounds like I'm hearing that voting seems official. And so you really want to get a little bit more time to kind of think through that, have it on the agenda, know in advance, and then be prepared to make that decision as a group. I'm seeing notes in the chat that they don't want longer meetings, but they do maybe want more meetings. That's definitely something I think the Air District can talk about and consider with regard to their schedule and their ability to do that. The holidays are coming up, but I know we don't want to rush this, and we don't want to have you all feel like the end of the year is looming and you haven't gotten done what you want to get done. So I see more meetings, not longer, sticking with the 2 hours. I know we're already 17 minutes over here. Ryan, can you please give your thoughts?
Yeah, just really quick. I just want to thank Noemi and Willie and others that have identified some ways that we can do this process better. We're definitely learning how to work best with the community. I think those are wonderful suggestions that we will definitely incorporate moving forward in this process. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan. It sounds like there's willingness to do whatever makes this committee feel like they're feeling connected to this process and that you're informed throughout it. So if we can go very specifically to the SERP, I think we know how we're going to move forward with the air monitoring plan, and I think that's a really good plan, and we can look forward to the next meeting talking about that with in more detail, and you'll see a version, the next version of it, maybe the close to next version, maybe final version or close to 72 hours in advance. We still have 25 SERP measures to review. Any thoughts, just take one or two from you, about how best to review that? What do you think about in this group? I mean, group editing is not easy. There's lots of information to share. Debbie, give us your thoughts on how you might want to do that with this team. With not longer meetings, just more.
No, I'm thinking if we could pick out some dates here at 4 or 5 dates in the next month and a half, and figure those dates to be, that's when we're going to hash it out.
So you're thinking 4 or 5 dates the next 6 weeks, mindful of the holidays. I do know that the Air District has a number of other commitments in terms of dates and requirements for other communities. So I certainly wouldn't want to commit them at this point, but they were thinking about another date in November. Air District team, that was the 18th for the next possible meeting? The 18th. Does everyone?
Could we do that then?
I think that would be the next, go ahead.
Could we do it at the next meeting then? Could we pick out 4 or 5 more dates at that time then? So we could figure this out?
How about this? How about we send out a doodle poll with the dates that we're available? Everyone can put when they're available, and we will try and pick 4 or 5 meetings between now and the week before Christmas.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Not including
thumbs up if you guys like that approach. Debbie says yes. Any other thumbs ups for liking that approach? Yeah, I see some no's. I see a couple yeses. Oh, Jonathan says a Saturday meeting, but then he said just kidding, so no. So let's do actual reactions so we can see them. Can you do a reaction thumbs up if you're okay with having a meeting on the 18th and then discussing doodle poll with the additional 4 to 5 meetings we might need to have over the next 6 weeks? Thumbs up. I see Mary. I see yes, Margot. Mostly thumbs down from Noemi. Let's talk about Noemi's thumbs down.
And before that, I just want to say that we have to discuss these strategies, and then we have to put them into a document. And then this still, even if we have 4 or 5 meetings in December, there will still be a need to have meetings in January to then look at a larger document that has all of these in them. So we're not trying, the 4 or 5 meetings between now and the end of December would just tee it up so that in January, we could hopefully have an entire document that we could give you all enough time to think about and discuss and vote on in January, might even have to go to February, depending on the back and forth with the bigger document.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a couple people that are flagging that it's just not realistic from their scheduling standpoint to do that many meetings in a short amount of time. And they're concerned about just that general process. There has been discussion about a single meeting that's maybe longer over a weekend as a joke, but then also not as a joke. Margot has her hand up.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that this COVID has made it very, very difficult for us to deal with this. When we get information, I think clarifying what you expect out of us is really, really important. So with this air monitoring document, which was, pretty complete, all it said was, what are your comments? Now, and if we knew that we were being asked about where the air monitors were being placed and all that, it would have been helpful to know what you were expecting for tonight ahead of time so that we could really review it and maybe comment to each other somehow in between as it goes. I don't know if there's a way to do that. I don't know if group emails or something like that would work, although those get complicated. So I'm not sure we'd want that, but food for thought. And with the SERPs, because the way you presented it today with the 25 highlights criteria, that was just so much more straightforward to be able to read. I'm sorry, the Excel spreadsheet with the tiny font and the difficulty with the stuff was just tough. So maybe break it down, give us the full sheet and then see, maybe we can discuss it in between or talk to each other in between. It feels like we're spinning our wheels here for quite a bit.
Yeah, one thing that's good is that you didn't have the document before today. And so what you will have this week is the document we started to look at with the SERP measures. So you'll at least have that to review and you can see it in a slightly different way. It has everyone's comments. So that'll get us a little bit farther along. I appreciate hearing that this version of it, the Word version versus the Excel version, is easier to see. So that is a good thing. It looks like multiple meetings and the Air District's going to send out a doodle poll to confirm which dates might work for you all. Everyone won't be able to be in everything, but what they can do is provide, everyone with all the same information to weigh in. I did see a hand that went up and then went down again. But I do think that it sounds like a couple more meetings, definitely. Debbie, I see your hand. A couple more meetings would be helpful. We're going to still try to do something on, I think, the 18th, but they're going to doodle poll to confirm. And then we're going to figure out how to balance what is this Zoom environment that, if we were all in the same room and we had sticky notes and large format things, we could get this done in a couple hours or a couple meetings. It's a little harder, certainly in here, and your flexibility has been amazing. Debbie, go ahead and tell us your thoughts before we close out.
I was just going to say, it's obvious that we're not going to all be able to make it at one point or another, but like you said, Erica, but if you're not going to be able to make it to a meeting, maybe you could contact one of the other people on the committee and have them kind of voice your concerns or opinions at that time. Just a thought.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That is a great thought. Noemi asked the Air District about physical mail and email of all the documents so that they can review in person.
Erica, just to chime in there, just let us know if you want a hard copy. We mailed out hard copies of a document in Fresno to everyone, and folks were a little upset that we were using paper when we didn't need to be. So I want to be very clear. If you would like to start receiving hard copies of these documents, you can either drop it in the chat right now, or you can email me directly, or you can email the AB617 email address. A few people are already receiving hard copies.
Yeah, thank you. While I do appreciate that environmental concern, and I promise I love trees, I also think that this is important enough that everybody needs their own copy to look at, and so they can participate meaningfully in the discussion without having to split their screens on the computer. Yeah, it's a little challenging, please. So I'm going to ask that if you would like us to actually tell you that we want hard copies, I'm going to ask on behalf of everyone who's not at this meeting right now or who doesn't tell you that they want them to just please be sent.
Yeah. We'll just swap it around. If you do not need a hard copy, please email me or drop it in the chat.
Thank you. Sorry to make it a thing, but I do really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's easy to do.
Okay, so we have gotten a lot of really good feedback today, and I feel like you guys were very honest. The Air District was really receptive to these comments. 72 hours of notice, specify on agendas when voting is happening, making sure that there's integration of comments into versions before voting happens. That makes some sense. If you want hard copies, please do make a note of it or not, as I'm seeing some people.
Everyone will get a hard copy. Everyone will get a hard copy unless they let us know they do not want a hard copy.
Right. And there's a lot of people in the chat that said they don't want it. So we will review that. And to the Air District's point, these are all part of the public record for this meeting. So we do have your notes. Please do drop that into the chat if you would not like a hard copy. Otherwise, you will be on that list. I see lots of no's. We are going to officially vote on the air monitoring plan at the next meeting, which is tentatively the 18th. But the Air District's going to send out a doodle poll with the actual dates to choose from for the next meeting or set of meetings. But plan on some type of voting for the air monitoring plan so Chai and his team can move that forward. And then we're going to continue to refine the process of SERP review. We're going to send out versions of the notes we sent today and the SERP document, which has 25 measures on it, so that you can review those in advance of the next meeting and give you the opportunity to kind of weigh in even more on that. What did I forget?
Real quick, just if we have that meeting on the 18th, the thought process would not to have an agenda setting. Basically, it would just be building off the previous one. I don't think we'll be at the point where we'll need to vote at that point. I think it's still just going through the individual measures and answering questions. I think we're still a little ways away from taking votes on any individual measures right now. So if everybody's okay with that.
Wait. Ryan, you're going to confuse everybody.
What's that? Yeah. What did I just do?
There will be a vote at the next meeting. It just
on the air monitoring plan.
I'm sorry, on the SERP measures. I apologize.
Yes. No vote on SERP, but there will be a vote on air monitoring to move that forward because those can happen concurrently. The SERP discussion is still very early. We're still working through that process. You're going to get a version of that to review this week, and then you'll have something in front of you that you can review during the meeting as well as we take live notes and get additional feedback from the group there and have larger discussion there. Got it. Two separate things, air monitoring plan, SERP, and then a number of people are going to get something printed out for them and mailed 72 hours in advance. I don't know that logistically you'll get that hard copy 72 hours in advance, but you will get electronic versions 72 hours in advance, certainly. What did we forget? What else do we want to add to this discussion before we wrap up?
Co-host for next time?
Yeah, co-host.
Yes, community co-host. We're moving to the formality of the closure, but it sounds like that part is done. Thank you, Jonathan. Community co-host, who wants to do this next? I think that Noemi did a fantastic job. Thank you, Noemi, for your insights, for your input. If we can do a virtual clap for her, that is amazing. Anybody else want to take this on? We're gonna have a big meeting the next meeting, so it'll be, definitely big shoes to fill on the next one, but it's not hard. We're nice people. If you do want to be, Catherine's previously volunteered, fantastic. We've got you on the list. If you would like to volunteer for this meeting coming up or a future one, drop your name in the chat and we do keep a record of that. We did take a lot of public comment today already, but I will ask our friends Heather and others to see if there are any other public comments before we go to the larger group discussion on anything else that we have not covered.
There are no new
Is saying
comments.
she wants to be the co-host for next one.
Yeah, we'll take it, Catherine. I think you've gotten it.
Yeah.
You win. And Heather says there's no public comment. No additional ones. We did get a couple during the meeting, which have been reflected in the chat as well. Air District team, anything to add on your end? Doesn't look like it. Catherine, you are our community co-host, so what I would say is that you would expect an email from the Air District team just to talk about the planning potentially for the meeting coming up. So that'll happen sometime between now and the next meeting, which is to be determined, but likely and potentially on the 18th. And again, thank you for the flexibility and the time. Many of you stayed an extra half an hour to get this discussion as robust as it was. Really appreciate your flexibility and the refinement that we have. And it's a hard process in a Zoom environment, and you guys are doing a great job, and it is not easy. And I think everyone's working really hard to make it as seamless as possible. There's hiccups, but we work through them, and the speed bumps are great. So thank you guys for that. Lots of good comments in the chat. I will turn it over to anyone to close us out.
I can do that. I just wanted to thank everybody for participating today. It is not an easy discussion sometimes. It is very important, the work that we're doing, and I just want to reaffirm that the people who are the most important in this entire process are the residents. So I want to make sure that whatever work we're doing, it directly benefits them. And thank you all for your flexibility. And I am honestly ready to just push it to January. Yeah, this is getting a little nuts in the best way possible because there's so much to learn. So thank you for that. And have a great night.
Thanks, Noemi.
Thanks, Noemi.
I believe.
Thanks, Noemi.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a great night.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Kim, I think you can actually turn it off. I was thinking about it.
The Facebook, I can.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Once she's host, she can. She has all the power.